on? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last talk of track 2 today. We have a super cool talk in the field of digital forensics, and specifically on per application registry hives. Please welcome Mary DeGrazia.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. I know it's the last talk of the day, which actually works out great for me. I actually flew in from Amsterdam last night, so I think they stuck me at the end of the day to make sure I made all my connections and I got here okay. So to that end, since it is the last talk of the day, I decided to throw in a little game for us to play. I'll tell you about that in a minute, but my name is Mary DeGrazia. I am a SANS instructor where I teach Windows digital forensics, and I also teach a class on ransomware. So I am really excited to be here today to talk to you about some artifacts that I think and I believe a lot of forensic examiners are overlooking. How many people in here currently do digital forensics as part of their job, whether you're doing incident response, a little bit, okay. So hopefully I can show you something a little bit new here today and get you thinking about some things. I am a director at ZeroFox where I do incident response. I've been in the field for over 14 years now. I have a bachelor's of science in computer science, and God, I'm old. After traveling all weekend, let me tell you, I am feeling it. In my spare time, I run an esports league, specifically in VR, where I do competitive sports and I try and get women involved in that. So our league requires a minimum of 1 woman per team, so that's what I do in my spare time. Okay. For our game today, I figure since this is a hacking conference, how many people here have seen the movie Hackers? Came out okay, good. We have quite a few people that have, great. Okay, I have 3 Easter eggs hidden throughout my presentation today. So if you spot one of these Easter eggs, and you're gonna have to be looking closely, I just have some swag that I brought with me, straight from Amsterdam. I have some backpacks here from SANS, and each backpack will come with a water bottle and a notepad. And if you're kind of like swagged out, I do have some candy as well. I got that. I have to admit I ate some of it on the trip home last night, but I do have some sour candy left. Okay. All right, so let's start talking about registry hives. Now, a lot of us have probably used registry hives in our examinations. They tell us a wealth of information when it comes to various things in digital forensics and incident response. So some of the things that we can find with registry hives are documents that have been opened up on a computer. We can look for things like data exfiltration in something called shell bags, documents that have been opened up, systems that have been RDP'd into. No surprise here, Windows is tracking you in so many things you do. And this is to make the end user experience better for you, but we can leverage these artifacts as forensic investigators. So I think we all know where these registry hives live at, right? They've been around for a long time and haven't changed that much. So we usually go to, our C Windows System 32 config, and in that folder, we have our SAM hive, we have our system hive, and we have our software hive. So these hives can tell us things like what things have been installed on the computer, different software that has been installed, and then when it comes to user activity. So every user that logs into a computer gets their own hive, and that will track things. Okay, these are the last 10 documents I opened up. These are the windows that I have open. When you have multiple monitors, who here has more than one monitor, right? We all do, right? We have 2, 3, maybe 4. Who thinks they have the most monitors? You do. How many do you have? 5 monitors. Can anybody beat 5? No? Going once? Going twice? Okay, 5 monitors, right? Oh, maybe you? 6. Oh, okay. He one-upped you. Okay, he's got 6. Okay. When you close your window and you open it back up, it remembers what monitor it was on, right? You're not constantly, shuffling and moving them around. For the most part, when you close an application, open it up, it remembers where you're at. And we have artifacts that tell us that. Those are called shell bags. When we look for threat actor activity on a system, if data has been exfiltrated, what folders did they go into? What were they looking at? Were they in the HR folder? Were they in the finance folder? Where were they? We're leveraging these hives, these user hives, to tell us that. So that is going to be at the root of our users directory, ntuser.dat. And then we also have what's called the user class.dat hive file. This one here on the bottom, that's our shell bags. That's related to our folder, our traversal that happened. ntuser.dat, that has all the things like the recently opened documents on the computer. Okay, that is pretty straightforward. We've all seen these hives and we have all worked with them. Now, Windows has implemented some new mechanisms that you can install software with. We've all seen the MSI packages, but they now have something called M6, okay? And M6 enables an enterprise to stay current and ensure that their applications are always up to date. So this is another way to install applications within the environment. And with the advent of Windows 11, even though this came out Windows 10, we're starting to see this be used more and more. One of these applications is Notepad. Okay, Notepad has recently gotten an overhaul. It's kind of went from, this text editor. Now it supports multiple tabs. Have you seen that? When you close out Notepad, it will actually save anything that you haven't saved so that when you pop Notepad open again, all that information is there. And now Notepad has migrated into one of these M6 applications. So we're going to be walking through that today and talking about some of the forensic artifacts related to that. But with M6, now we are going to get something called registry redirection. These applications that are using M6 are not writing to the ntuser.dat hive. When you open up applications, and so for instance, Notepad, and I'll show you in a minute here, when you open up Notepad, it is no longer writing to the recent documents key that we've been looking at for years in the ntuser.dat hive file. It is now writing to its very own registry hive associated with that particular application. So if forensic examiners are not aware of this, there are artifacts that you can be missing in your examinations. Okay, so where is this information at? All right, right here, we go into our app data local packages folder right here. I'm going to tell you, do you see it? Crash override. Good job. Okay, see me afterwards. Yep, crash override. Does everybody remember who crash override is? Maybe? Maybe? Okay. All right, and for those that came in late, we're playing hackers. Look for some Easter eggs. We got 3 of them in the slide set. Okay, so it's going to be in that packages folder. Now the reason, or one of the reasons why Microsoft is doing this and splitting out this data is so that you can have a cleaner uninstall process when you're uninstalling applications. How many of us have just gone, God, Windows is slowing down, it's taking forever, right? Like every 2 or 3 years, you just rebuild the operating system or you install a fresh copy so you don't have to deal with that. So M6 applications, this is one of the reasons why they're implementing this, so that we can have a cleaner installation, uninstallation process, okay? In addition to third-party apps, like right here we have an example, Dropbox. Okay, so Dropbox is in here in our local packages directory. We also have WinSCP. How many people here are familiar with WinSCP? Well, what if I told you now some of the registry entries that we've normally seen in our ntuser.dat hive are in a completely different location? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we can also have the native Microsoft applications as well. And one of those examples is Notepad. So, digging into it right now, what kind of registry hives can we look for? Okay, so user.dat. So instead of our ntuser.dat hive, now we're going to look in that local packages directory for a user.dat hive. Instead of our usr class.dat hive, which is our regular hive that we go into for shell bags, we are going to look in that packages directory for a user's classes .dat hive. Now there's also a registry.dat hive, but I haven't seen this one yet being used that much. So the main two are this user and this user classes .dat hive. And here is an example right here. So I'm going to take you right here into my, oh, did we lose the signal? Okay. Let's see. Go into display settings. One and, Let's see. I see it doing something. Okay, good. All right. So I am in my app data local directory right here. And if I go into packages, JKLMNOP packages, look at all of these packages that exist in this directory. I have over 121 of them. So now I'm just going to search, whoops, right here for Notepad. That way I don't have to look for all of them. Okay, so we're going to go into the Notepad directory. I'm going to go right here into my system app folder, and then there's this directory called Helium. And right here, I have a user.dat hive and a user classes.dat hive. So here, I have registry hives that are not living basically in the places I've always looked at as a forensic examiner, right? See Windows System 32 at the base of my users directory of my ntuser.dat hive. I have 2 of these hives living outside of that are now available for me to conduct an examination. And it doesn't stop there. Just opening up my forensic program and putting a filter on for user.dat and my user classes.dat hive, look at how many of these registry hives I now have available to look at. And these are hives that traditionally examiners have not been looking at that store some really critical information for us to look at. So, what kind of information can we find in it? All right, let's take a look. I'm going to go ahead and open up Notepad. All right, and I'm going to go to File, Open. Now, if you're not familiar with this, this is called the COM Dialog 32 box, and it stores a lot of information in it. Right here, I have the last path that this application used, and then right here, I also have a drop-down box that has a ton of documents that I have opened up with this. So I'm going to go ahead and use Registry Explorer, and we're going to go in and take a look at my typical ntuser.dat hive. If you're not familiar with Registry Explorer, this is a great tool you can use to go in and to work with registry hives. All right, I am just going to go into my live system. So what's really nice about Registry Explorer is I can use it and just access my hive live. And my user account on this computer is just called user. So I'm going to select the user ntuser.dat hive right here. I am going to cheat and go into my bookmarks right here on the right-hand side, COM Dialog 32. I know that got really small. So right here, I'm going to go into my COM 32 dialog box, which is the box that I just pulled up. And this is where it is storing that information. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to I'm going to jump into this key in my registry hive. So we're going to go take a closer look at this right now. Okay, my OpenSave PID MRU is the key that I was just using, and we're going to take a look at text files, because I was just opening up text files. Now notice here, in my Windows ntuser.dat hive, I only have about 7 or 8 of those showing up. I should be seeing quite a few more, because when I went into Notepad and I went File Open, look at how many are stored here. That is definitely more than 7 or 8. So this is just demonstrating that these entries right here are not being stored in the ntuser.dat hive. They are being stored in a completely separate registry hive than the one that we have traditionally looked in as forensic examiners. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to load up that hive right here. I'm going to go into Notepad and go up into App Data Local. Okay, we're going to go up here to Packages, and I'm going to go back into that Notepad directory. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to go into my System App Data Helium, and here is my user.dat hive. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And we're just going to minimize this one right here. Now, the way that the overlay works is, now I have this user.dat hive. I'm going to open it up. Now, notice how it doesn't have a lot of keys in it compared to my regular nt-user.dat hive. And the reason why is that program is only storing the information that it needs or it is storing for that particular application. So right here, I can go into Windows, current version, Explorer, COM Dialog 32. So here is the information. So what this application is doing is, instead of taking this information and writing it to the nt-user.dat hive, it is writing it to the per application user.dat hive. So now we have a separation of information that we are not going to get as forensic examiners if we're just looking at the nt-user.dat hive. We have to make sure that we're going in and we're also looking at the registry hives that are associated with particular applications. So if I go into my COM Dialog 32 right here and go into my OpenSave PID MRU and put in the text extension, here are all of these files that we saw in that drop-down dialog box. And once again, these are not being stored in the typical nt-user.dat hive. They are being stored in a completely separate location, which means this is information that you could be missing in your examinations. So to that end, I also found or saw this user classes.dat hive. Now that is a hive that is normally associated with our shell bag activity. So if we have a threat actor that is in the environment, it's pretty typical for them to do things like run a scanner when they're doing their reconnaissance work, and they save that out to a text file, and they open up that text file. And typically, we will find evidence of that in the nt-user.dat hive underneath our recent documents. And if they browse into a folder to open up a file, let's say they use something like Mimikatz, right? We've all heard of Mimikatz. They use Mimikatz to dump out passwords. I've seen before where they will browse into a zip file or they'll browse into a folder, and the folder name will be Mimikatz, and we usually find evidence of that in the user's nt-user.dat hive as well as usr class.dat hive. Now, if they use something like Notepad to do that, those entries, once again, are not going to be in our typical registry hive. We have to go into the per app registry hive to find that information. So I did some testing where I plugged in an external device, and on the external device I made a folder called Top Secret, and then I put in ewok passwords.txt file for all my Star Wars passwords or whatever, and I opened that up with Notepad. And what I found was that information was not being stored in the shell bags information. It was being stored once again in the per app location related to Notepad. So to demonstrate that, if I go in and open up, I'm going to go ahead and close out both of these hives so we don't have them in here anymore. And open up, I'm going to go to my live system, and then I'm going to go into my users, and then I'm going to open basically our default shell bags location right here, user class.dat hive. And when I open this up, I'm just going to use Registry Explorer to run a search for Top Secret. And if you haven't used Registry Explorer before, this keyword search will basically search throughout the entire registry. You can look at key names, value names. It will go in and look at Slack. So if an entry has been deleted, you can use Registry Explorer to search for it and to find information there as well. So when I run a search through that, even though I browse to it opened up folders and opened up the document, I am not finding any evidence in the current user classes.dat file that that folder had been traversed to. Now here's where I go in and I open up the per application Hive to take a look at it. So I'm going to go ahead and go into load Hive, and I'm already in the Notepad directory, and I'm going to choose my user classes.dat Hive. So this is my app specific one. Now I'm going to run the same search and click search, and now it finds it, and that's because it's been pulled out into that other location. So I'm going to double click on this, and this is basically going to take me into this shell bag entry right here. And here's my top secret data directory right here that was browsed into. So once again, that information is not in my typical shell bags location. And this is huge because this is one of the locations that we always go to as forensic examiners when we're looking for evidence of data access or data exfiltration. So the fact that if we're not looking at these registry hives, we could miss really important evidence in an investigation. Okay, and that's just what I walked through right there. Okay, arc reactor. So a couple years at CactusCon, I actually made some of these arc reactors and handed them out as prizes. And it was a pretty good time. So here's some pictures of what it looked like. So in addition to Notepad, Notepad isn't the only Microsoft application. We also have things like Photo Viewer. So if you're in law enforcement or working those type of cases where you're wondering if certain images have been opened up, you are not going to find that if they're using that app to do it, which a lot of them do. It's the default app. You just double click on a picture. It uses the Photo Viewer. It opens it up. Well, guess what? It is not going to be in the ntuser.dat Hive at all, either in the recent documents or in that COM dialog 32 entry that I noted. So on the right-hand side, I went through and I searched both registry hives to see where it would appear and where it would not. And all the ones in yellow, I did not get any hits on those anywhere within the ntuser.dat hive. These were all being stored in the per application specific ntuser.dat hive. So quite a few things that might not get found if we're not checking that. Okay, WinSCP. Who here uses WinSCP or has used WinSCP? If you're not familiar with it, it looks like a lot of you are, it's a way to transfer files. Well, threat actors will use WinSCP to move laterally throughout the environment as well as to exfiltrate out data. When they do this, WinSCP records a wealth of information inside the registry. We get things like the byte count, we get the remote directory. I've seen before a threat actor use WinSCP to transfer files up, and in that history I can see actually what folder they were accessing on the remote system. So maybe it's a staging place where they have their tools, or maybe they're exfiltrating out data, and on the remote system they actually have the name of the client on the remote system. We can have things like the last folder that was opened, files copied. I have a whole presentation that's about 35 minutes long that I gave specifically just on WinSCP and how to break down the various artifacts associated with that. Now, typically, when WinSCP is used in this fashion, once again, this would be recorded in the ntuser.dat hive. However, if a threat actor or a person is using the WinSCP that is in the application store, none of those entries are going to be made here in the ntuser.dat hive. They are all going to be made in that user.dat hive. So we can see this key, it's called Martin I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. That is the author's name, and that is where those registry entries are stored. So taking a look at that, we can see that there is a lot of information that you can find. So I'm going to go ahead and close out these registry hives. I personally prefer just working with one registry hive at a time in here. So I'm going to go in and load up the hive for WinSCP, so we could take a look at that. Go up. I want to go right into packages directory, and we're going to find WinSCP, system app data, helium, and user.dat hive. I'm going to open this up, and when I go in, once again, it just has a smaller subset of keys inside. Here's my Martin folder, WinSCP, and you can see here, I have session information. So I have right here an IP address of a system that has been connected into. Going in further, I have different configuration values. So my CD cache, these are CD or change directory commands that are basically being issued through WinSCP. So all of this information, once again, is just being pulled in to that specific user.dat file and will not be in the typical ntuser.dat location where we find it. So it's just not there. So forensically, how do we get this information and how can we work with it? Because through my research, I found that some tools do not support it. Well, the first thing you need to do is you have to collect the data. So there is a tool out there called CAPE that can go through, and you can use basically what's called a configuration file. And you can, within CAPE, pull up this configuration file and choose what it is that you want to collect. And let me go into my forensic tools right here. Actually, I'm going to go on the desktop, and I have it right here. Where's CAPE? All right, well, it's here. I know I have it somewhere. Can you see it? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, CAPE. There it is. Okay. All right. So when you launch CAPE, has anybody here before used CAPE to do collections? It's a great tool. It's a free tool written by Eric Zimmerman. The licensing is free as long as you're not using it to make money. So if you're using it internally or for education purposes, it's free. Right here underneath our target collections right here, you can choose basically what it is that you want to collect. So double clicking on this, you can see this will go in and collect all of these artifacts. So the tool right here, this is what we want to use as our target, is we want to collect basically these MSIX, and there's also something called AppX that also behaves in a similar way. This will go into those packages folder and collect all of our various registry hives. So basically you can get this collection done in one shot, which is really nice. And once you get that, you have to parse out the registry hives. Now, what's interesting is I could use Registry Explorer to open them up. Another tool that I like to use is RegRipper. RegRipper is a command line tool, and you can feed it various plugins that will go through and parse out the data. So right here, I have a COM dialog 32. That is the registry hive that I went into that showed basically what folders had went into and what files had been opened up with a particular application. That is the plugin that you can use to parse that through. And then right here, I specify the hive that you want to parse through, and then basically everything that is related to the ntuser.dat hive. So that's going to pull out things like WinSCP, our recent documents, and things of that nature. This is what this looks like. It's just a plain text file that has outputs, but it's really nice because you can easily grep through that. You can look through that. You could scale that up and start using that. He also has what's called TLN plugins, which support a timeline format, which can help you standardize your data as you're working with it. So RegRipper is a great tool to go through and to parse this out. And here's an example of pointing it at that user.dat hive, and it's pulling out all of that information related to the WinSCP artifact. You can use Registry Explorer, like I showed you, just to pop it open and to work with it. And Eric Zimmerman also has a tool called Shellbags Explorer. Unfortunately, because the user classes.dat hive is not technically a shellbags, a full shellbags, it just is the overlay. It only has a subset of those folders that are inside. Shellbags Explorer does not currently work with it, so you have to work with it in a raw format and open it up with Registry Explorer to take a look for that information. So here's an example right here, and how I showed you just a few minutes ago that you can use Registry Explorer to pop that open and to look at it and to pull out that information. You can also use this tool. You can use strings just to go through it, and then you can also use Eric Zimmerman's implementation of B strings as well. Gibson, right? That was the mainframe that they were going to hack into. That was a tough one, I think. So Good job. All right. So that can go through, and you can just use strings to pull out that information. So if you're looking for a particular folder, then that's the easiest way to do it. All right. So we spent a little bit of time talking about the registry hives, but I kind of have a bonus that I'm going to throw in. Earlier, someone was talking about RDP and the fact that threat actors come in through RDP, you know, the top three, right? When it comes to memes, when we talk about ransomware and how threat actors get into the environment and how they leverage RDP for our initial infection vectors, a lot of time we see RDP, we see phishing emails, and we see vulnerabilities being leveraged. So RDP is a huge artifact that we look at when we do our examinations. Not only are they coming in externally, but RDP is used for that lateral movement within the environment. Well, guess what? Microsoft has a remote desktop app that you can use in the store. And they also have the MSTSC client, which can be used. Now, if a threat actor is using the app, some of the locations that we normally see this in, we are not finding them there anymore. Once again, because of the way that the App Store works, applications are now splitting out and storing the data that we typically look for in different locations. So when we talk about something like the registry, there are some registry entries, if they're using the app, that we will not find that we've always looked for as forensic examiners, something called the RDP hint. We can go look at the RDP hint to see what systems they have jumped into. So if I'm a threat actor and I come in and I pop that RDP box, you know, typically from there, I'm going to find another system, my staging system, and then from there, I might hit all the rest of the systems in the environment that I want to go to, 3, 4, 5, 6. So a lot of times, we're looking for outbound activity on a system to other systems. The RDP hint is a place in the registry where we can go find that they went to. Another one is jump lists. Well, the app does not make a jump list entry in our jump list. Now, when you learn about jump lists in forensics, you always learn that any application that opens up or executes on there, you're going to find a jump list. Well, it's not there for the remote desktop app. But we do get some additional things to look at. We get things like thumbnails, trace logs to look at, credentials, and connections that have been made with RDP. So the saying goes, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right? Here is an example where I RDP'd into a system in February, and going in and looking at the RDP hint key that we always look at in the registry, there is no entry in there for that system that I RDP'd into. Okay, so this software Microsoft Terminal Service Client Servers key, once again, is not storing that information. Now, if you're not familiar with what a jump list is, if I go into my RDP client right here and I right-click on it, this is a jump list. It basically contains shortcuts that will let us easily move into something we recently opened up. If I right-click on PowerPoint, here are all my latest PowerPoints. So right here, if I right-click on this jump list here, there's no evidence that I remoted into that system. Well, that makes sense because that is the Microsoft Terminal Services client. That makes sense there wouldn't be a jump list there because I am actually using a different application. So I figured, okay, I'll go take a look and I'll go find the Microsoft app RDP jump list in my typical list of jump lists that I parse out. It does not even make a jump list here or any entries for a jump list, which is kind of scary, right? Because this has been one of our go-to artifacts as forensic examiners to find evidence of RDP, especially outbound activity. So just to be safe, I parsed through that jump list for the Microsoft Terminal Servers client, and it still was not in there. I did have the one system I connected into, but not the second system I connected into using that particular application. Okay, but the funny thing is, if we take a look, and here is the client, this is the remote desktop app. If I right-click on it right here, I can clearly see that there are jump lists associated with it. So if that jump list wasn't here in this folder, but I have a jump list right here. Where is that information being stored? Because it's certainly not being stored with the jump list in their typical location. All right, well, because it is an application or a Microsoft application, it moved all of that information once again into our local packages folder. And it's in a folder called Jump List Connections underneath a local state remote desktop jump list connection args right there. So jump lists are not being stored in their typical location. They are being stored completely separate in an XML file. So going into here, let's see, what did it say? Local state, remote desktop app, and jump list connections. So in here, each one of these is basically my jump list file. If I right click on this and open it up with Notepad++, I can see I have some information in here. So this is the IP address that was connected into. I have a display name. This display name is like a nickname given, I don't know why that keeps flying out, given by the user. So that's just so I can easily remember what computer I'm connecting into. That is not necessarily the computer name, it's a nickname that I'm giving it right there. I also have something called a connection ID. This connection ID is something that is going to map to another file that we'll need here in a little bit. So this is basically my jump list information, but now it has migrated into an XML file and is no longer being stored in an actual jump list. So that's a little bit concerning, but we do get some thumbnails associated with it. If you're familiar with the Microsoft Terminal Service Client, there's something called the RDP cache. And it will cache pictures basically as, you know, if you're a threat actor and you're on another system and you're jumping from system to system to system, it's actually going to cache images on the local computer. So you can rebuild these cache images and you can get some, you know, little snippets of what they may or may not have been doing on the system. I'm still looking to see if those are made for the app, but what I did find is we get a thumbnail. So what happens is a threat actor connects into a system. When they disconnect from that system or close out their session, it takes a screenshot of whatever is on that desktop when they're done, and it saves that. So that means we can look at these thumbnails for systems that a threat actor has RDP'd into and potentially see what they may have been doing in the background. So for instance, something like network scanning. If they launch a network scanning tool and then they disconnect from that system and they connect into another, I could find evidence of that network scanning tool running on a system. Or I might have things like a folder in the background that they were traversing into. And this is from an end user perspective. When I launch remote desktop, this is basically what it is presenting to me as the user so that I can remember what I RDP'd into last in what system. And these are the nicknames right here. These are not the actual computer names, but rather they're nicknames that I've given to the computer that I've connected into. So these thumbnail files are stored in the same location in our packages directory, local state, remote desktop data, and then right here, I can go into the remote resource thumbnails. Right here, if I want to know what computer this came from, this is going to map back to my jump list. I had that connection ID in there. I can take that connection ID and I can map it to the file name right here, and that is going to tell me where this thumbnail comes from. If I right-click on this and take it into Notepad++ right here, can anybody recognize what kind of encoding this is? Base 64. Yeah, so this is just basically the thumbnail has been encoded with base 64 right here. So I can just take this into something like CyberChef. I can decode this, and then by the time I'm done decoding it, I get a nice, pretty thumbnail of the system that the threat actor went into. And so once again, this is different than the RDP artifacts that we've had available to us in the past. This is associated with the RDP application or the remote desk application from the Microsoft Store. So if the threat actor is using something like that, it's going to be stored in a different location. The other thing we have are credentials. The Saw your hand go up. Acid burn. Okay, that was the other one. So acid burn. I can't believe Angelina Jolie was in that movie, and her partner, the main character, the guy in that, was the new Sherlock Holmes, right? The one with like all the tattoos. That was him too. I couldn't believe that. So right here, we have a credentials folder that we can go into. And if the user has elected to store credentials, this is where we go to find that information. So right here, we have our password vault resource ID. Then we can use like a Nearsoft tool to go in and to dump out those credentials right in the control panel, and we can know what the credentials were used to go into that system that they RDP'd into. All right. Okay, we also have ETL logs that we can go look at. We get an ETL log in I can't remember what the ETL stands for. Tracing logs, Windows tracing logs. They're basically tracing logs that you can go in and look at, and we get an ETL log for every single RDP session that was done on the system. This can have a ton of information inside of it, and you can use a cool tool called Tracerp to go through and to parse this out. Now what I noticed when I parsed out these files, right here you have a clock time. This is stored in a Windows time format, so you can use a tool like Decode to go in, put that in, and you're going to get a timestamp. And you can search the logs for this internal connection state manager on login completed and connection close. And that is going to tell you when the connection started and when the connection ended, along with a username and the system that was connected into. Now what I noticed was, even though I used the IP address to connect into the systems, like I typed in the IP address when I did the RDP activity, in this log it actually logged the computer name that was logged into. So if you're in an environment that's using something like DHCP and IP addresses are changing, this is a place where you can map it to a computer name, which should be, for the most part, static, and it can help you determine which systems they moved into when they conducted that activity. Okay, that is it. Finished a bit early, but are there any questions? Thank you. Yes. One of the reasons. So there's probably multiple, yeah, no, but go ahead. So it's supposed to, let's see, this is Microsoft documentation on it, and these are kind of all their features of, developers. Why should you, use our MSIX? And for multiple reasons, reliability, network bandwidth, the disk space, I'm not really sure why they decided to, but my understanding was basically that way when you uninstall an application, it could just basically go into that entire directory and delete it, rather than going into the main directory and removing all the registry entries from there versus the per app ones. Basically, what I've noticed as a forensic examiner is a lot of these applications now, especially with Windows 11, are starting to move into the Microsoft App Store. Notepad is one of those key ones that has done that. It now has more features in it. It's got tabs right here. It's behaving more like a browser. It's actually behaving more like Notepad++, which I really, really like, right? But if I go in here and I open up a tab and I type in some information right here and I close it, and then I open it up, even though I didn't save it, it is now remembering that information. And that's actually stored in that local packages directory in a tab state folder. So now if a threat actor is using Notepad and they copy and paste things in there, or they open up a password dump file and they close it out and they don't save it, that's all being stored in that local packages directory. So traditionally, as forensic examiners, we've had these key places that we've looked at and we've focused on for years, right? Like the jump list, the ntuser.dathive, the user class, system, software, SAM. Now that is all being pulled out and stored in other locations, and it can be very easy to miss something if you're not aware of where these applications are potentially storing their data. So. That's a great question. I haven't seen it yet, but some of the cool things we can do as forensic examiners, one, the nice thing about the registry, even if they delete keys in the registry, we can use something like Registry Explorer to recover them, because you can't like wipe the registry the same way you can forensically wipe a file. So my hope would be if they deleted some of these files to get rid of them, you might have the ability to go in and recover them from unallocated space. I haven't seen it yet, where they're going in and cleaning up, but I have seen them do things like use portable versions. Like I've seen them use a portable version of Mozilla Firefox to come in and do something. And once again, it's all storing it in one location. So if we're just looking at internet history in our normal places, it's separated out. But yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, because sometimes when I use the text editor, I open it up in Notepad++. Sometimes I open it up in Notepad, and the same with the images. If I use another application to open it up, it was showing up in there. So if I had like a clean test system and I only used it that way, there probably wouldn't have been some of that overlap that was happening. Any more questions? Yes. Are you asking from a forensic standpoint or more from like an attacker? Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So command line tools, I tend not to do my investigations that way, but you know, there's some command line tools you can use like RegRipper to pull them out. If you have something like Sysmon and you're monitoring, I think it's event, I can't remember what the event ID, but you can have like registry changes there. I'm a Python user. I have a book that says learn PowerShell and you know, like 20 lunches. I haven't done it yet. But if anybody knows of a good way to do it, like from the PowerShell command line to look at these, yeah, because they're not loaded up in the traditional sense, right? Like if I went to my registry hive right now and looked at the active keys just through regedit, well, they are overlaid, so they might actually be pulled in. I have to take a look to see what that looks like live, like if you go into a live system and look at it, if it does that overlay or if it's separate from it at the same time. Yep. Any more? Yes. Oh, do you have a Windows 10? Check, I'm not sure when Photo Viewer started to work in Windows 10 that way, but that might be the Windows Photo Viewer. You could take a look at that. And you can try installing the remote app. Well, you said by default. I was going to say you can try installing the remote desktop app and see if that works as well. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, and actually you can probably just pop open your packages directory and see what's inside there, and then just do the little search filter for the user.dat hive and just start popping open hives and see if there's anything in there. Anything else? Any more questions? Okay, great. The people that won, go ahead and come on up and I'll give you, you can choose your backpack and water bottle or candy. And if you don't take the candy, I'll eat it. So that's okay if you don't take that. All right, great, thanks. And hope everybody enjoyed the conference.